Welcome to MetaFile. We've been helping companies solve document issues for over 30 years. Today I'm going to introduce you to our MetaViewer solution. MetaViewer is an enterprise-wide solution that helps companies bring efficiencies to many parts of their organization. Today we're going to focus on how MetaViewer can bring control and efficiencies to the AP process. MetaViewer is known as a document management system, a content management system, an imaging system. There's many classifications that MetaViewer can fall into. MetaViewer begins by capturing documents as soon as they come into the organization. We can capture both paper and electronic documents in the system. And one of our distinct advantages is our approach to help companies focus on capturing these electronic documents before they become paper. When we capture an electronic document, we can full text index that document to preserve the textual information it contains. Then we can copy and paste that text into the MetaViewer system in much the same way that people are used to using copy and paste functionality in standard Office documents. We use this information to identify or link these documents together in MetaViewer, but we can also share this information with your Microsoft Dynamics system. So nobody has to key the information into our system or Dynamics. Unfortunately, there is still a lot of paper that's out there, so we have ways or tools to capture these documents in the system as well with any kind of scanner, multifunctional copier, fax server, those types of things. Unfortunately, a scanned document is just a picture. There is no text for us to extract, so we have other tools to automate the extraction of information from paper documents. We can read barcodes that the documents contain, or OCR the document, which is a technology that translates that picture back into text, and then we can use that textual information the same way that I talked about with electronic documents. The second aspect of the AP automation solution is workflow. Most people think of workflow as the routing of a document from person to person, and this is a big part of workflow, but to MetaViewer, workflow is quite a bit more than that. We can actually process documents so people don't have to. Workflow can extract information, share that information with your Dynamics system, check for missing information or documents, auto-route documents depending on certain conditions that exist. Lots of different ways that we can do some process automation with workflow. The other interesting part of MetaViewer's workflow is that we track audit logs. Anytime anybody touches a document, we know who did what with it, on what date and time, what are all the parameters of the documents currently being processed. And then we can use these audit logs to give managers key charts and graphs and indices as to the status of everything that's being processed. And so they can manage at a much higher level, and then they can click on these charts and drill down into the documents that make up those particular conditions. The third aspect is retrieval, and this is just simply giving everybody easy instant access to the documents when and where they need them. The nice thing about our solution is the only software that you need to participate in workflows and retrieve documents is the internet browser that you already have. Using that as a platform to talk to the MetaViewer server to retrieve these documents, so nothing has to be loaded on everybody's workstation. The other aspect of retrieval that makes it even easier for those users who are core users of Dynamics and spend a lot of time in Dynamics is we can actually link directly from the Dynamics screen. So if you're in Dynamics and you need to see a document, you click a button and then the document is displayed there in the browser. So really those users, those core users in Dynamics don't even really need to know MetaViewer exists. They just need to know to click on this new button and see the documents appropriately. The last aspect of the AP automation solution is kind of an optional component, more of a phase 2 type of a project, but all the advantages that I just talked about of how MetaViewer can bring some efficiencies to your organization, a subset of those kinds of capabilities can be given to your vendors through a vendor portal, so they can log in and check the status of their invoices, or maybe even perhaps upload their electronic invoices through that vendor portal. Now let's talk about pulling some documents in and showing how we extract that information from those documents. Invoice Accelerator is the tool that we use in the AP process to pull information from both structured and unstructured documents. What that means is an expense statement might be an example of a structured document where data is in the same place all the time. Well, those documents are very easy to process, so I'm not going to spend any time talking about those. What's more difficult is an unstructured document like an invoice. Everybody's invoice is just a little bit different. So how does MetaViewer know where to extract invoice number and purchase order number, or even the line item details from those documents? And I'll show you that when we pull some documents in. This tool works with both paper and electronic documents, as I discussed earlier. To show you the difference between those two types of documents, I'm going to open up one of each. And we'll drag this one over here, that one over there. Now really on the surface these documents look very similar. The difference is the document on the right, the light products invoice, is an electronic document. And if I come up here and say edit, select all, you can see all the text that document that it's highlighted in that document. And this is that textual information that I mentioned. We can copy and paste any of that information out of that document and put that into our system in the appropriate places. Now the Midwest Travel document on the left, that's a paper document, a scanned document. If I come up here and say edit, select all, you notice that nothing actually gets highlighted. And that's because this is a scanned document, it's just a picture. There is no text to extract. So both of these documents can be processed with Invoice Accelerator. The only difference is the one on the left would be OCR'd first and then processed with Invoice Accelerator. Now let's pull some documents into Invoice Accelerator and show you how those documents get processed. Here's pulling in that light products invoice, and as you can see as it pulls it in, it actually extracts some information from this document. It kind of analyzes it and extracts some, up top here, what we call summary information about this document. And these fields can be whatever you want them to be. These are just some examples that I like to use in demos because they're pretty common things like invoice number and date and purchase order numbers, amounts, those kinds of things. And I'm going to get into how it could have extracted the line item information as well, but I'd like to do that on the fly, so we'll cover that here in a little bit. How MetaViewer analyzes this document, if I click on this invoice number field, for example, it looks for key anchor words, in this case invoice no, or invoice pound, or invoice number, those types of things, and when it finds it, it grabs the value right next to it. In this case, since this is an electronic document, we copied that 28100 value and automatically filled that in for invoice number. And if I click on some of the other fields, you can see that it found the date and grabbed that value. Purchase order, PO pound, it found that and grabbed that number. Terms. Now terms is kind of an interesting thing to grab off of an invoice because we can actually validate that. Once we grab that value off of that, we can look in the master vendor table to determine whether that's the same terms that we have on contract for that vendor. But we can also use that information to calculate things that might not be on this document and fill fields in with that information, like discount percent, discount amount, or discount due date, those kinds of things. And that can be very useful as we process the documents in the workflow. Other things like invoice amount, I come down here, I see that it grabbed the amount. And then tax, it found the tax where the tax information was, but because it's blank it didn't put anything into that value. Now line item extraction, we can actually also set an Invoice Accelerator to automatically look for all the line item detail in the invoice and extract that information and feed that to other systems. So I like to do this on the fly though, so I'm going to come up here and say auto find the fields now. And it analyzes this document, it locates the part of the page that it thinks has the line item information in it, and then just like it did up above, it looks for keywords, and like QTY in this case, or quantity, or item, or product code, and it grabs those values. And what I can see down here at the bottom, if I make this a little bit bigger up here, pull that up a little bit, you can see that it grabbed 5 different line items out of this invoice, and then we can do a validation check when we extract that line item information, where I take the invoice total less tax and shipping and those types of things and compare that to the sum of all the detail items as I see over here on the bottom right, and I show a green difference of $0, so I know everything was grabbed correctly. Now that I've analyzed this document, I can say finish document, and it's going to prompt me for a profile. I'm just going to accept the default because I really don't care what it's called. And now two important things happen to that document. First of all, it gets put into workflow to be processed with all the other documents in the system, but more importantly, it's going to save that profile. So now the next time we get an invoice from Light Products, we're going to be able to, it's going to come into MetaViewer, and MetaViewer is going to say, oh, I know where everything is. It's going to automatically extract all that information, feed it into the workflow, and then nobody has to touch that document. So here's that Midwest travel document, that scanned paper document, and as you can see as it came in here, it analyzed the document just like the electronic document. The difference, as I said earlier, is that this had to be OCR'd, and if I click up here, I can actually show the OCR results of this document, and it does a very good job. OCR technology has come a long way. You can see here it grabbed the you can see the invoice numbers and the dates and the item information down here. So then it gets processed just like the other one. If I come over here and select on invoice number, I see that it grabbed the invoice number and that 28536 and populated that. Invoice date. PO number, I'd found the PO pound, but because it's blank, it didn't fill in a value, etc. And just like the electronic document, I can come up here and say auto find the fields to find the line item information. And if we scroll down here, I see that it identified the part of the page that contains the line item information. I see the two lines, and then the validation all checks out again. My difference, a green difference of $0, so I know it grabbed everything correctly. Again, I simply say finish the document, and then prompts me for the profile. I accept that, and then I'm done. Now let's look at MetaViewer's workflow and that process automation and how we can make the whole process more efficient. Workflows can vary depending on the types of documents that are being processed. For example, PO type invoices, typically workflows surrounding those are auto validation of some of the summary information from those documents, routing to buyers to fix discrepancies, and then giving those users a reconciliation view where we can kind of consolidate the information from the purchase order, from the receiving documents, and an invoice all kind of in one convenient spot. Workflows for non-POs usually center around more of the GL coding and of the documents and escalating for approval limits and those types of things. When it comes to GL coding those invoices, we have some tools to help auto-distribute the codes or auto-generate the codes based on certain parameters, or for those approvers who are maybe doing the coding, we can do some approver assist where we can help them navigate as to what are the appropriate codes and validate those codes so that when we push that information up to the dynamic system, the codes are correct and then are all validated as well. The third aspect of workflow is that exchange of information with Microsoft Dynamics, being able to share the information that is in our system with the Dynamics system, and then pull values down from Dynamics as needed as well. And then the last aspect of that workflow piece of the automation example is those graphical management views, using all the data from the documents and the status of the documents that are flowing through there to give those managers key views into that information. Email notification is a way that MetaViewer can communicate with the users of the system to alert them that something maybe needs their attention. We can attach links to the documents in the system or attach the documents themselves, alert multiple people, even assign time thresholds. So if people don't handle something in an appropriate amount of time, we can escalate that or send them a reminder, those types of things. Now, as you see here from a purchase order, we'll get into a purchase order workflow. I could get an email that looks like this that says there's a discrepancy with a purchase order invoice. I can see the link where I can click there for the to link to the invoice, and then we can use some of the details of the transaction and populate that in the body of the email as well, so you can kind of know what what the invoice is all about. So if I click on this link, it'll make a call to the MetaViewer system and display that document back in the browser and in the PO reconciliation view screen. From the PO reconciliation, I can see this document. I can see some of the details that we extracted out of the document up here, and then the grid, as you see down below here, is really designed to consolidate all that different information that's out there about this transaction. I can see some of the purchase order quantity, the received quantities, and costs with the receiving and the purchase orders, as well as the information from the invoice. So as I said earlier, just kind of accumulating all that data and being able to display that real nice and easily with that invoice. And then as I'm looking at this information, I have links to other documents that I might want to see, things like the purchase order, the packing list, and the lower left here. So if I wanted to see the purchase order, for example, I'd simply click on purchase order, and it makes the call and looks up that document in the MetaViewer system, and then I can see the associated purchase order with that transaction. So now that I can find that, and I can go back to the invoice and really process this accordingly, I can complete it, or I could maybe route it to a buyer or something along those lines. Now let's talk about a workflow for more of an approving of documents and assigning GL codes to non-PO type of invoices. Similar to looking at purchase order types of invoices, I could get emails to let me know that I've got something to approve. I simply click the link and go to the document and see a summary of the invoice here in the email. Or we don't have to always rely on email notification to alert people that something needs their attention. For example, if I'm in my home screen within MetaViewer, I can see different queries and searches and tools and things that I use to do my job. And as an example, I can see this AP code and assign invoices query, for example, with a little 5 after it. That tells me, without even opening it up, that I've got 5 invoices awaiting my approval and coding. So if I simply click on that, it shows me the list view of all those invoices, and I can control what kinds of information across the top here I might want to see in this list view. I'm just going to simply open up this an example of one. And the use of this GL coding interface screen really varies from customer to customer. Some will auto-route the document, have MetaViewer auto-route the documents to the approvers based on vendor name or ship-to address or something along those lines. Others will send the document to AP first, who maybe assigns it to somebody, maybe does some preliminary coding, and then assigns it to the approver. But really, to give you kind of an overview of what this interface is like, I'm just going to show you some of the capabilities in this interface. First of all, up here in the upper left, we have kind of a summary information from this invoice, and when it comes to assigning things, I've got some tools for there. I can actually have a cost center and an assign to, and we can actually nest these fields within each other, and I'll show you what that means. For example, on assign to, if I click on this drop down, I have this very large list of names. But I can also kind of make that list dependent on what cost center I'm in. So if I come back up here to cost center and I start typing the cost center in, you can see it kind of narrows my choices down to where I get to, we'll select 30 there. And then when I tab off of that, it jumps me down to the assign to field. And now when I select the drop down, I have a much smaller list of people to choose, and I'm just going to simply select that one and then move on. So from here, then I could to forward it on for an approver, and then in the coding screen down here, let's take a look at that. We can have some of the similar capabilities of that nesting or from one field to the next as I start enter the account information, the sub account, the amounts, and so on. So for example, if I'm a skilled user, I can actually just enter the code and tab to the next field and then move very quickly from line to line. If I'm not a very skilled coder, I can actually click a drop down, simply select a code, for example, and then when I tab to the next field, depending on what code I selected here, this drop down will give me a list of choices that correspond or are valid with that main account code. So I simply select one, tab over to amount, and we'll just enter the amount here. And then the other aspect that we can do from a coding perspective is we can calculate use tax. So if this invoice didn't have tax on it, for example, I could select the checkbox there, and when I tab off of that, based on this account code, it will automatically calculate the appropriate tax that should be applied to this invoice, and then the code that goes along with that as well. So we can upload that to the system and then make sure that everything is accounted for there. The other aspect that we have from a coding perspective is we can do auto allocations. I'm just going to delete this row here and show you the auto allocation, which is over here. It defaults to the full amount, but I can actually have predetermined allocation amounts for an invoice like this. So for example, if I come over here and I select a drop down and choose this business reply example, and when I say load, it's going to take this amount that I entered in there and distribute that according to the predetermined distributions. In this case, I think it's a 60-40 split, to where this code gets 60% of it and this code gets 40% of it. So it kind of can assist in helping auto assign without having to fill in the multiple lines. So that's just a brief overview of the GL coding workflow and capabilities within that type of a system. Now we're going to discuss how MetaViewer can exchange information with your dynamic system. We have many tools to help keep the two systems in sync and pass data between the two systems. Depending on which flavor of Microsoft Dynamics you have, these tools kind of vary. We can communicate with web services, eConnect, data population, which is have the database tables talk to each other, or even flat file import-export. When we pass data between the two systems, it actually can go to various places within the system depending on what the data is, and we can actually transfer that data in both directions. So if MetaViewer knows something that Dynamics doesn't, we can push that information up to Dynamics. If Dynamics knows something that MetaViewer doesn't, we can pull that information down to help auto index or auto identify documents within the MetaViewer system. And in many cases, this is automated in real time. For example, when it comes to invoices, we're going to extract that information and then push that up to the invoice register. As you see, this is a screenshot from one of the versions of Dynamics there. Then dealing with that data in Dynamics, Dynamics has a lot of capabilities that can then maybe process some documents and then feed the results back down to us. An example, here's a screenshot, I believe this is from AX, with the automated matching capabilities of Dynamics. And you can see when lines match, they have a little check mark here, and then when they don't match, I can see my price discrepancies and quantity discrepancies as they're listed there. When things don't match, as you see here, that check mark becomes an exclamation mark, and Dynamics does a very nice job of highlighting up top here that there's errors. And then when I look at the unit price, I can see that there's a discrepancy there, and then the quantity mismatches as well. So there's a lot of capabilities that we allow Dynamics to do some of the processing, and then we can do some of the workflow and controls, but really choosing the appropriate place to do that work and then keeping those two systems in sync. From Dynamics, if I'm in a screen and I'm working with a document in there, I may want to see the document. So to do that, we have the capabilities to put buttons on the various screens within the system. As you see here, with all the other buttons here, we just simply add a MetaViewer button. When I click that button, it can give me a dropout that tells me, let me see the orders, the invoices, packing lists. So if I simply click on the invoices, for example, it makes a call to the system and then retrieves that particular invoice back in the system. And then I could really have my dynamic system and the invoice side by side. So that's kind of a brief overview of the integration with the dynamic systems and MetaViewer to pass information between the two systems. We can talk more specifically on a one-on-one basis with your unique requirements. Now into the graphical management views, where I talked about how MetaViewer tracks audit logs. Anytime anybody touches a document and all the parameters associated with those documents are all captured within MetaViewer, and then we can use those to give real-time charts and graphs and indices. For example, as this screen depicts, I can see the total discount dollars currently being processed, or the invoice totals being processed. What's due in 3 days, 3 to 7 days, over 7 days, what steps, how many documents are in each of the steps. And then these charts and graphs can have thresholds built into them so that they change from blue to yellow to red when certain thresholds get met. So if I'm a manager and I'm looking at this on my home page and everything is blue, I assume everything's going to be processed in an efficient manner. My people are doing their job, and I don't really need to worry about anything. When things start to turn yellow or red, they hit those thresholds, and if I as a manager want to drill down into what's making up that red bar, for example, I simply click that red bar. It makes a call to the MetaViewer system and then brings up all the documents related to that particular bar. From here I can see a summary view here. I can click on any of them and drill down into them. If I wanted to analyze this information, I can actually click and export that search results to an Excel spreadsheet and then evaluate the parameters of that as well. So the audit logs are very powerful. The other aspect that we can do with those audit logs is run reports against those audit logs to give you any kind of information that you want. If we can run the reports on a periodic basis, and obviously we're going to capture those reports into the MetaViewer system and to give you kind of a chronological history of those statuses and then important data. But we could also build reports that you could run on the fly. Enter some key data, it queries those audit logs, and it gives you some examples back. Productivity reports are pretty popular. Vendor performance reports, evaluating your vendors and what percentage of the time are invoices having some kind of an exception that require extra processing. So really giving you beyond just a document management system, but giving you some key tools to help evaluate your performance and really help you run your business better. The last aspect of to round off the AP automation solution is that phase 2 or optional component that I mentioned at the beginning of a vendor portal, basically giving a lot of the capabilities that I talked about throughout the presentation, giving a subset of that to your vendors that they could log in and check the status of their invoices and that type of thing. And then MetaViewer keeps the vendor portal, the MetaViewer system, and your financial system all in sync with each other. Obviously very secured, that they can only see the status of their invoices, perhaps even upload invoices electronically so that then they can be processed with the MetaViewer system as well. Well, that wraps up today's brief overview of the MetaViewer AP automation solution. We look forward to working with you in the future and to kind of helping tailor a presentation to your exact needs and requirements. You can contact us at info@metaviewer.com. Thank you.